amongst all these other failings over the last 2.5 years in gut rest and time and again of doctors saying, she doesn't fit FPIES with failing everything. There's something else going on, but not knowing what it is. There's lots of anger involved, lots of praying, but lots of anger because I just didn't understand why God wasn't healing her and why my faith wasn't strong enough to, move this mountain. I was praying. So what was I doing that wasn't enough?
Welcome to Mom's Grab Coffee, where you'll be filled with wisdom, faith, and hope through real testimonies from moms of how God works in our lives. I'm your host, Hannah Lapsansky, and I invite you to pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready, my friend. We're about to speak the truth. Hey girl, thanks so much for tuning in. I have a really great topic today, and that is self-blame. Whether it's in our motherhood journey, maybe as a wife, a friend, or daughter, there can be lots of situations and circumstances in which we are blaming ourselves for certain outcomes or how something is going. And that can really be toxic for us. We can tear ourselves down and start to spiral. So today we're going to talk about how do we get out of that. Larsen, who is a mom of two, a former pediatric nurse, as well as a blogger at This Bread Will Rise, is going to share her journey through her daughter's diagnosis of FPIES. FPIES is a GI condition. She's going to go into more of the specifics, but she really struggled with self-blame through this hard journey that's ongoing. And she's going to talk about how she looks to God to hold her up rather than turning on herself and tearing herself down. It's a really special story. She gets really raw and real about the struggles that she had, not only with her daughter's diagnosis, but also with God. And she talks about what she does when it's really hard for her to pray and how she finds God's peace and comfort, especially when he feels far away. It's all about waiting well, which doesn't mean she's happy or joyful all the time. She'll certainly get into that. And the practical tips she shares are things that you can apply right away. And lastly, she shares her challenges with this whole idea of your faith isn't strong enough. And if you've heard that before, if you struggle with that, you're going to find a lot of comfort and reassurance in what she's going to share. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is Lauren's story. Lauren, welcome to Mom's Grab Coffee. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me and allowing me to be on your show.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to dig in today because we're going to be talking about how we navigate struggles with faith as well as self-blame, especially when it comes to our kids. I mean, that weight of feeling like we are solely and exclusively responsible for what happens to our kids or how our kids' lives turn out is so heavy. And I think a lot of us can just feel that weight. And you've been navigating through that with your daughter's diagnosis of FPIES. So let's start with this. What is FPIES?
So FPIES, to put it simply, her body acts like she is allergic to foods, but without a true allergic reaction. So it's all GI symptoms. But it stands for food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. So her body reacts to the protein. There's protein in all foods, not just the protein foods. And her body reacts to that like it is something bad, an allergen. And so she ends up with lots of GI symptoms from having any food in her system.
And this is your younger daughter?
Yes, the 2.5-year-old.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thankfully, she's the spunky one.
She's got strong spirit.
Oh, yeah.
So when was your daughter diagnosed with FPIES?
We kind of started seeing signs of more than just being a spitty baby at first. And so we kind of started this whole journey when she was around 5 weeks. Went through several doctors, some tests, ruling out more serious not that this isn't serious, but, anatomical issues that could be going on, and made it till she was 4 or 5 months and still having symptoms. And we had seen a GI doc and told me basically it was just, normal newborn intolerance through my breast milk. And so I had been eliminating foods. And so by the time she was around 5 months old, I had gotten pretty extensive in my eliminations. And there were many things I was not eating. And so at that point, felt like it was time to see a pediatric allergist to try to get these symptoms to improve. She had severe eczema. She vomited after almost every feeding, was not wanting to eat up through the night, crying, screaming, arching in pain. It was really painful to watch her continue to suffer. So got in with a pediatric allergist and had an appointment a few months out, but thankfully, with God's help, she had a canceling and we were able to get in sooner. With her visit started her diagnosis. So we did testing with her, and she was able to lead us then to the dietitian, who then led us to a GI doc who happened to be a specialist.
Yeah, that must have felt like such a relief. I mean, searching for answers for 4 or 5 months.
Absolutely. And to finally have an answer, it was, yes, scary to know that, okay, our daughter has this diagnosis that is going to be such a challenge, but also knowing it was an answer and we so desperately needed an answer, it was like a huge weight was lifted off, while another one was kind of being put on, but just being given a direction was a huge blessing in itself and answered prayers.
Yeah. And so what did your faith journey look like from 5 weeks old with your baby to the moment you got an answer?
I think at that point, it was a lot of questioning of what is going on, knowing that God was in control, yet not seeing an improvement. With every food I took out of my diet, it was another prayer of, God, please let this be the food that causes my daughter to not be in such pain. Let her be able to keep down this feeding. Let her be able to take enough milk and to not get dehydrated. Let her, have improvement this next week. Maybe I can do something to improve her situation. And I was praying, but I still felt like it was up to me to make it happen because it was my direct actions of the food I ate that was causing these symptoms. Not that I was doing it on purpose, obviously, but it was my actions. So I felt like it was still up to me, even though I was, it's like I was praying to God, but taking it right back and going, okay, now I have to do this. So it was more like I was praying that he lead me to do the right things because I hadn't seen an improvement in her. And I feel like I kind of continued that even after her diagnosis because unfortunately she was not a typical FPIES case and was not clear. With her, it should have been, yes, we trial foods and there are a couple fails, but we should have some safe foods. Whereas in her case, she's now 2.5, and she is still on her infant formula because she has failed all of the toddler formulas and she has failed almost every food, and she'll do okay for a while and then fail it, even her safe foods. So it's been a lot of praying of, God, please, I don't understand. And a lot of anger, honestly, towards God. And it's so painful to watch your child suffer for so long and to not see through all of our different interventions. At one point, I was only eating salmon and apples for 2 months to try to get her body to calm down and to be able to nurse her, and knowing that switching her to formula was going to be its own huge process because, they can react to so many different formulas, and she hadn't had formula. And formula just doesn't taste good. So to switch a child who wouldn't even take a bottle over to formula was going to be a huge thing. And with FPIES kids, that's challenging because they react to so many formulas. And so lots of prayers said about finding the right one. And her dietitian knew of one that was not an elemental formula she was able to get on. And it worked, and she passed it, and she didn't refuse this one like she was refusing all the other elemental formulas as much. And within a month, we were able to completely switch her over, which was a huge blessing because she was able to start gaining weight again and growing, and her symptoms started improving so much just by being on formula and not breastfeeding. And so that was just, kind of a sign from God that this is the plan that was supposed to happen. And it was hard for me as a mom to, stop breastfeeding and knowing that this is, the right plan. And it was. And she continues to be on that formula and continues to, even though it is an infant formula, it doesn't have the right, the full nutrients and calories that she should be consuming at 2.5. She's still gaining and growing. And, a lot of the medical professionals look at that and go, she's still on her baby formula. Well, her growth curve looks great. So I don't understand it, but we'll go with that and just be thankful for it. I'm like, well, I understand it because it's an absolute miracle. And I'm so thankful for it. Amongst all these other failings over the last 2.5 years in gut rest and time and again of doctors saying, she doesn't fit FPIES with failing everything. There's something else going on, but not knowing what it is. So for the last, period of time, there's been a lot of, questions and not knowing what to do, and lots of hospital visits and doctor visits and working with the team to try to figure out what's going on. And like I said before, there was lots of anger involved, lots of praying, but lots of anger because I just didn't understand why God wasn't, healing her, why, and why my faith wasn't strong enough to, move this mountain. I was praying. So what was I doing that wasn't enough? And there were just so many ways I felt like I failed her. I was a pediatric nurse. Shouldn't I be able to figure out the other things that were going on, in addition to the symptoms I was already telling the doctors, but to try to help them come up with the right diagnosis? So what was I missing?
I'd love to dig into the your inner struggle with faith, because you're constantly praying, you're constantly connecting with God, you're constantly having conversations with God. But you also said that you were angry with him and that you struggled with why God wasn't healing your child. So what helped you keep that conversation with God going? And why didn't you just close the door on him?
I think a part of that was I grew up in a strong Christian home, and the church was very much a part of my life. It was kind of my second home. My mom was the preschool teacher in the basement of church. So if I wasn't at home at school, I was at the church. And so I had a solid foundation, but honestly, I had never had a crisis or something that, affected me so deeply where that caused so much doubt and anger. So that aspect was new. But I had a support system. I had people praying for me. I had people I could ask to pray for me when I felt like I couldn't pray the right thing, saying, I'm angry and I know that God can do this and he's not, but so can you pray for me too? So having seen God work in many ways before, just not seeing him in this instance, I know that he's fully capable. And so through all of my anger, I never wanted to turn away. I wanted to come to God and give it to him. And I tried on so many occasions. I was in Bible study, and after her diagnoses and working through that, I was angry through a lot of it, but had the women in my Bible study continue to pray and encourage me, even though I felt like my faith wasn't strong enough. After that, felt led by several different people. I no means feel like I am a writer, but they encouraged me to start a blog and never thought that that was something I would do. But the feeding therapist and the dietitian I work with said, this could be a great resource to other moms with FPIES, following your journey and, giving them advice of, ways they can present different foods, like presenting, blueberries in 20 different ways, to, different textures and stuff. That could be a help to them. That can be a way, you minister to other women. And then the therapeutic aspect, my therapist saying, it could just be a really therapeutic way of, verbalizing this whole journey and, other people reading it. And then, of course, I had to include the baking therapy too, because I just love to bake. So starting that, and then through that, offered a chance to write an article for a Christian blog and wrote that. And I think that writing that article is probably where I had the biggest realization of how much God had been working through everything. And I had less anger and more understanding of his constant presence. Because earlier this year, we're doing my Bible study's doing Matthew. And we got to the verse in Matthew chapter 15, verse 23. Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. And reading that, I'm like, okay, my faith is not great enough. My daughter's not healed. Like, what am I doing? And I want to have this great faith. And then being reminded by the people in the Bible study of, God's time is his own time. And it's not that he is not working on it right now. And when I wrote the article, I realized, as I'm writing all this stuff that we've gone through with our daughter, but then God was there when he provided the medical team that people search out these medical professionals with FPIES. They are all the best in their field. The dietitian, best in her field for FPIES. The GI doc, the allergist. And we just happened to get them on our team. So God provided them for us. I have a therapist. Wasn't looking for a Christian therapist. I was looking for any therapist that I could get into. And she happened to be a strong Christian therapist and has been an amazing person to talk to. All of this doubt that I have, I realize, God isn't telling me my faith isn't strong enough. That is completely Satan telling me that. And then reminders from the members in the Bible study, the fact that I'm in a community where they have such strong faith and they all have their own journeys that they have been on and knowledge and wisdom from that. And so they offer their encouragement and, reminders that it's not that your faith isn't strong enough. It's just God is working in his own way in his own time. And don't believe what Satan is telling you that you're not enough. Just trust God. I try to read the Bible every day, a little devotion. I have a devotion sitting next to my sink in the bathroom that I can read while I brush my teeth. But that doesn't always happen with my two girls. But every night, my daughter, we read a devotion with her. So even though it is for a child, I get a lot out of her devotion too. And I feel like even through that, God can reach me. And there's one the other night about God sending showers of blessings when they're needed. And I'm like, okay, I will hold on to that. When we need them, God is going to, send that shower of blessings for us. And that just gave me a moment of peace, like doing the devotion with my older daughter, but knowing, okay, God is going to bless our family. Yes, we've had struggles, but he is here and he knows when we need things and has come through with them. There's a verse this year in our Matthew Bible study that was Matthew 6, verse 30. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? And I'm like, okay, if God looks after the grass and the flowers and cares for them, he is taking care of my daughter, even though so much more would he, want to look out for my daughter. He's her father and loves her. And,
you're hitting on so many great points right now. It's not about earning God or earning his love or even earning his power, because that's not what the Bible says. I mean, exactly to the verses that you spoke of. It's not about how much faith we have that moves God. That is absolutely Satan speaking to us and saying, your faith is not strong enough. Why are you even trying? Like God's not going to do anything for you. And that's just such a lie that we have to get out of, our minds and systems and constantly work to get that out. So through this journey, it's been 2.5 years now. If God had healed your daughter, say on week 6, as soon as you found out, I wonder how your influence on others would be different. And of course you would never choose, I think you would always choose to heal your daughter now, right? That's what we would all want for our kids. But the fact that God is using this for a greater purpose, and that you're blessing people with your story, you're helping them, whether they know God or not, you could be that gateway to help them know God and have a relationship with him.
Well, I can actually answer that and tell you that, so my older daughter, she actually has a genetic disorder, but it's an atypical presentation of it. And so it didn't take all that long, a couple tests, to figure out that, she had it, but she was okay. She wasn't really affected by it. And so being told that, your child has a genetic disorder is scary. And, we prayed and we were worried about it, but, with the quick resolution and knowing that she was okay, I have to say that I don't know that my faith grew or changed all that much other than, being thankful and appreciative. But I don't think I really witnessed to anyone about how, yes, she had a genetic disorder. It's not really something I, have told a ton of people because she's not really affected by it. So I didn't really use that to, share my faith with anyone. Whereas you are completely right with, my younger daughter's journey. I have put myself out there and I've listened to God. And I have to say, I have always prayed for neon signs. God saying, this is your answer. This is what you should do. Because I think that would be so helpful. And growing up, my parents were wondering about buying their property. And my mom prayed for a sign. And we went there's a barn on this property that they were praying about. And there were 2 literal signs. One said my mom's name and one said my name on them. And so my parents are like, thanks God for the sign. So ever since then, I'm like, okay, God, I could use one of those actual signs that tells me, all these answers that, I'm praying about. But I think that he just has used me in a different way and grown my faith. And I would have been a very hesitant witness because I don't put myself out there being very introverted. I would not have started a blog nor written an article nor, done your podcast, without being led by God and with this journey. As much as I don't want my daughter to suffer, I'm glad that I am able to reach people through it. And I hope that, it does help.
I want to pivot our conversation to self-blame, because that's something that so many of us moms struggle with. Even if you're not a mom, I think we're
self-blame is so easy to do.
Oh my gosh. Yes. For everything. Right. So when it comes to self-blame, how have you navigated through that? And how has this journey helped you combat that negative self-blame?
So that is a great question. I don't know how I would have answered that, even a year ago. I am very thankful for having to go through this in a way, because it has caused me to, I think, see things differently. Like it isn't up to me. I think before I prayed and I said, God, let this happen. And then I looked for the ways that I could make it happen.
Yep.
I prayed for community when we moved here. We moved, right when I was pregnant with our first daughter, to a place that neither my husband and I knew anyone, for a job, and no family, no friends. And so I was praying for community, and I felt like it was up to me to make that happen. Did I really make that happen? No. Did God make that happen through me starting a blog and all of this other stuff? Absolutely. It wasn't until like I let him take over and I realized, okay, I'm not the one that has the power. I was praying and then taking it right back. I think that I struggled with thinking it was still all up to me. And at some point I had to give up thinking that, and it was hard as a perfectionist and, wanting to do something. And I think one thing that helped me, well, there are a few things. First, I will say there was a Bible verse in Genesis when Joseph was sold into slavery. And it starts with meanwhile. Meanwhile, he was sold to Potiphar, and who was the captain of the guard. But that meanwhile, meaning God was working through all of this horrible stuff. I mean, his brothers sold him to slavery. I mean, how awful is that? But it was for God's plan to save Egypt. Like, he had this grand plan that who would have thought that, could save him from this famine by being sold into slavery. I think just focusing on everything that God is doing and looking for the little things, looking for the meanwhile. What is God doing in this time of waiting and trying to figure out what the answer is? God has a plan, and this stuff is happening for a purpose. And it's all going to add up to God's perfect plan, because his plan is always perfect, even if I can't see it. And even if it frustrates me and makes me angry, which I'm so thankful that God still loves me because of that, and is okay with that because he understands my human side. His grace and patience with bringing me back has been huge. God also put a physician in my life, me personally, that realized that I could greatly benefit from medication, because the anxiety and depression that I was going through with my daughter constantly being so sick and not having answers was huge. And also suggested that I talk with a therapist, which I have previously mentioned. So I feel like, yes, that is adding something, and it's not just praying, but I feel like God led that doctor to suggest that, and it helped me immensely. And I wouldn't ever want any mom that feels like they've been praying and it is just blaming themselves because they cannot get out of that place of feeling so hopeless. I was crying in the corner after my daughter went to bed every night because I was worried that she had not taken enough of her bottle that day, and we'd end up in the hospital the next day. To be able to get out of that with the help of prayer, but also I needed medication and a great therapist who was thankfully a Christian and could understand, both aspects of that, the mental side and also the prayerful side. So, she ends the session with, and I will be praying for you this week. So God worked it all out and combined it all together. And I don't want people to think that it is less of you if you need to have the help of medication and therapists, because I think that God provides that too when we need it. And it's still God working in our lives, just in a different way.
Yeah. Thank you for being so humble and honest about that. I think that sometimes there can be a perspective that faith and therapy and medication are at odds with each other. But I think you're right. God uses all kinds of people and ways to help us through our journeys and let us know that he is there. He is working. He is, putting things in our path. So I think that's so awesome that you shared that.
Absolutely. Well, and that was, if I stepped out of my comfort zone to do this, I feel like I wanted to share with others the words I desperately needed to hear. and that it wasn't just me and it wasn't that I was a bad Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that sometimes it's thought that way, but I am a firm believer now that, I didn't go into this thinking, I'm going to need, all this extra help because, I don't think that God can do it. That wasn't it at all. I had confidence God could do it, but, I also needed this other support, and I needed someone to tell me that. And so I wanted to, as I'm stepping out of my comfort zone to talk with you, step out of my comfort zone to share that too, just in case it helps one more mom out there.
Thank you for that. I love your heart. So I want to ask you, you're still in this journey. You're still in kind of a waiting season where you're trying to find healing for your daughter, right? So when we're in a waiting season, whatever it is, how do you wait well?
Well, patience is hard. Waiting is hard. It takes commitment and work. It's not something you can just sit through and it go well, unfortunately. And you mentioned earlier, like, why didn't I turn away? Well, because I was determined not to. I didn't want to turn away. I knew that God was there and I knew that he was working. I just couldn't see how. And that didn't mean I wasn't angry, but I'm glad that God loves us anyway, even when we're angry. And so I think you have to just keep wanting to have a relationship with God. And it's kind of like, you say, I love you, but I may not like you right now. And it's not that I'm saying I didn't like God, but I always love God and want to have that relationship. But that doesn't mean, just like with a loved one, you can have anger, but you want to, obviously stay in that relationship and be patient and know that you can work through it. And so joining the Bible study has been helpful because sometimes it's tiring, and I feel like I can rest sometimes knowing that other people are taking up the, prayer warrior position for me. There's another thing that helped me: take care of yourself. Being outside in nature is where I feel closest to God. I just feel such a strong connection getting out in the woods and seeing bodies of water, or I just get a sense of peace. And so going on runs and walks and stuff, letting me have that time. Yes, it wasn't me reading scripture, but it was me having God's peace and just that time to just feel his presence. I don't know. I just kind of feel like, you step into the woods and God gives you a hug of peace, of calm reassurance.
I can totally understand that. The ocean is definitely my happy place and where I love to go just to connect with God. Now, I don't live near the ocean anymore, but when I did for just a short period of time in Boston, I could feel God's peace. I felt like I could connect with God. So I definitely feel you on that.
Well, and to just, have that peace and the intense wonder of he created all of this and how amazing it is. And sometimes, it's easy to take for granted, but and I will say I do take it for granted a lot, but to just be able to enjoy that, and like, I'm sure the calm of the waves, and we live next to a river, going by the river and just hearing it. And it's just so peaceful.
Yeah. One of the things that would come to my mind when I was looking out in the ocean was, it's so vast. It's so big. God is so big. And it really kind of put my circumstances in perspective, where I could see myself as so small, but in a good way. God is bigger.
Absolutely.
God is bigger than everything else that's going on.
Another thing that I didn't even think about doing, because when I think of asking for help, I was a part of a mom's group, and the asking for help was always, when you've had surgery or when you've had a baby or something related to you physically. And so I never thought that I could ask for help. And the women in my Bible study decided for me that they were going to provide me help, and they delivered meals. And just that in itself, it's not that I physically couldn't prepare them. It was that they took something off my plate and cared for me, and just allowing people to care for you when you are in that period of waiting and mental exhaustion provides such a comfort. It made a huge difference to me, and I felt incredibly blessed by that. And was just kind of gave me that refresh of, okay, you know, God is caring for us, and he's provided so many ways that is happening. And right now it's through this meal that someone dropped off for us. And it was a wonderful thing. So in a period of waiting, ask for help. And it doesn't have to be meals, or be open to help. When someone offers help, you know, if it's someone wants to come clean your home, let them help. Yes, you may be physically able to do it, but mentally, God might be providing a little break for you.
Oh, I love that. I was just going to say, as you were sharing that, I absolutely love that you received the help, you know, because I think, you know, even if we get it, it's like, oh no, we're okay. We're okay. You know, we like to take all of the things upon us, but you're right. That could very well be God's expression of love in our lives.
Yes. And I keep adding one other thing and one other thing.
No, I love it. I love it. Keep going.
I just was thinking about, you know, the members of my Bible study, and I was going to share one thing that one of them mentioned the other day, which made a huge difference in my praying too. She reminded me of, in a Jesus Calling devotion, it talks about when you pray, you ask Jesus and God to grant something, to take care of something. And then after that, I felt like I was stuck in the repeated, God, please heal my daughter. God, please take care of my daughter. God, please be with us. Instead of then going to the thankful side of things of, thank you, God. I know you are caring for my daughter. And so ask him in a prayer. But then after that, you can thank him for being there and thank him for working on it, even if it hasn't happened.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, Lauren, so I want to end with one last question here. Looking back on your journey, looking back at how God has used this journey for a greater purpose, and used you for a greater purpose, and to glorify his power and all that he is. If you could summarize it, who is God?
God is so hard to narrow down to one thing. God is a father, which I think is so important for me, especially watching my child suffer. And I mentioned it in the article that I wrote, you know, wondering if God couldn't see my daughter suffering, and if he didn't understand that, and then realizing he understood it to a whole different level than I could even understand, because he watched his son suffer on the cross for my sins. And he absolutely knows what it's like to be a father to everyone. And so his love is uncomparable. So he constantly and graciously and unendingly loves us. And that is such a comfort in knowing, as a father, he wants the best for us. He always wants to care for us and won't abandon us. And his forgiveness is limitless and wonderful. So that is something that I love to hold on to, just feeling that love as a parent to my daughter, and then knowing that it's so much more, you know, from God. But God is also sovereign. He is in control of everything, no matter what. And it is sometimes hard to hold on to that confidence in that, the full belief in that. But with constant reminders of knowing he is the great physician. He is the one that can heal anything. He has every ability to do anything that is asked. And it just depends on what his plan is and what his timing is. And knowing, you know, I caught myself at times thinking, okay, well, what do I want the outcome of this test to be? You know, if it's the answer of this, you know, issue, there's a fix for that, but it could be a pretty serious issue. If we don't get an answer, that's good, because it means it's not, you know, this serious thing, but then we still won't know. And then I caught myself going, I can't control the results of this test. All of my worrying, you know, which way it should be isn't going to change anything, because God already has this plan in place. And yes, he is offering me answers because he knows my need for answers. He's offering me answers through tests and through physicians. Me worrying about it and trying to figure out what I want it to be doesn't change it. His plan is perfect. His timing is perfect, and he is sovereign and will take care of all of it.
Such beautiful words and amazing wisdom. Thank you for that, Lauren.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Lauren, before we close out, I'd love to give moms a place to go to connect with you. Where can they go?
They can always visit my blog, and you can contact me through there. There's a spot to email me, and that's thisbreadwillrise.com. You can also just, if you enjoy baking therapy as well, come join me for baking therapy. I wish I could bake and eat with everyone.
Yes.
I am on Instagram. I will admit I have yet to fully figure out Instagram. I have the intelligence savvy of a much older person. So I am on Instagram, This Bread Will Rise. I will absolutely try to figure that out even better if people want to connect through that. And then I have a Facebook page, This Bread Will Rise page under my name as well.
All right. That was Lauren Larson of This Bread Will Rise. And as always, I like to recap a few points from the conversation before we wrap it up. If you're in a waiting season, or you feel like God isn't hearing you, or he seems completely absent, a really important thing to do to continue leaning into God is seeing how he has worked in lives before. It could be your own, or it could be someone else's life. That said, be careful about comparison traps, especially when it comes to God's work. He may choose to allow something that you perceive as good and merciful in someone else's life and wonder, why isn't he doing the same for me? Those questions are certainly natural, and we will ask them of God. But remember, he has a specific plan for each of our lives, and it looks different for every single person. So be careful not to get caught in comparing your life to others. Instead, look at the way God is working in their lives as testimonies of God's character and power and what he can do in your own life and circumstance. Second, remember to take care of yourself. Figure out where you can find that peace and comfort with God. For Lauren, it was the woods and the river. For me, it's the ocean. For you, it may not be nature at all. It might just be sitting quietly in a dark room. And I know it can be hard, especially when you have kids in the house. But if you can find a few minutes where you can center yourself on God, that can make a big difference. Third, lean into your support system. Whether that's friends, your church, your family, ask them to pray for you. Also ask for help, and then be open to that help. God might be using those people to show up in your life. He might be delivering a gift to you. Also, he might be using that other person to build their faith and obedience to a calling he's put on their heart. What if they are being called to serve you? Now, in this conversation, we also talked about the role of therapy and medication. God can use people and tools in mighty ways. But let's also remember, the enemy can as well. So let me be really clear. We are not at all saying all therapy and all medications are great. We are also not saying those things are all bad. These are all personal decisions that should be informed and led by your doctors as well as the Lord. Coming up in the next few weeks, I'm going to meet with Tabitha Yates, who's going to help us dig a little bit deeper into the role of medication and therapy when it comes to the church. So stick around for that. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss out. It's a great conversation. And lastly, I want you to remember this from Lauren. She said, "Thank God even if what you're wanting hasn't happened yet. Thank God that he's still working even if you can't see it. And thank God that he has everything under control, that he has a plan, and it may not look like what you want, but it is going to be perfect and it is going to be right." To connect with Lauren, you can visit her website or Instagram. I will have both links in the show notes, as well as momsgrabcoffee.com/19. Okay, my lovely mom friend, thanks again for joining me today. I hope you have an amazing Memorial Day weekend coming up. I'm Hannah Lapsansky, and I'll catch you next time for another cup of coffee with a side of faith, wisdom, and hope.